Hello, and welcome to today's video. There comes a time in life when the roles between parents and children start to shift. As parents, we've spent decades raising, guiding, and sacrificing for our children, but suddenly, something changes. Maybe they ignore your advice, dismiss your opinions, or even make you feel like a burden. If you've started feeling this way, it can be frustrating and painful. The lack of respect can hurt deeply, but getting angry or demanding respect usually makes the situation worse. So, what can you do to regain the respect of your children? Today, I'm going to share 6 powerful ways to regain the respect you deserve without fighting, without arguments, and without resentment. Stay with me until the end, because the last tip will be a game changer in how your children see and respect you. Let's get started. Action 1. Stop chasing their approval. One of the biggest mistakes parents make, especially as they grow older, is trying too hard to please their children. Perhaps you've noticed yourself doing this. You go out of your way to accommodate them, say yes when you want to say no, and put their needs ahead of your own, hoping they'll appreciate you more. The painful truth is, the more you chase their approval, the less they respect you. Respect isn't earned through self-sacrifice. It's earned through self-respect. When you always bend over backward, when you always give in, when you always try to keep the peace, what you're actually teaching them is that your feelings come second. And once they start believing that, it's easy for them to take you for granted. I once knew a woman named Margaret, a strong and independent lady in her younger years. But as she grew older, she started letting her children make all the decisions for her. She rearranged her schedule around their needs, kept her opinions to herself, and even ignored the way they spoke down to her. She thought she was keeping the family together, but what happened? Her children stopped valuing her. They saw her as someone who would always adjust, always agree, always stay silent. She thought she was keeping the peace, but she was really losing her voice. If your children don't respect you, the first step isn't to demand it, it's to stop acting like you need it. Set boundaries, say no when you need to, speak your mind, even if they don't like what you have to say. The moment you start respecting yourself, they will start seeing you differently, and in time, that respect will come back to you. Action 2. Don't argue. Lead by example. When your children dismiss your opinions or treat you with disrespect, your first instinct might be to argue, to remind them of everything you've done for them, or to demand that they listen. But let me tell you something that will save you years of frustration. Arguing never works. When was the last time you convinced someone to respect you by fighting for it? Respect isn't earned through words, it's earned through presence. It's about how you carry yourself, how you respond when others try to test your patience. If you meet disrespect with anger, all you're doing is confirming what they already believe, that they have power over you. Take Frank, for example, a retired teacher who had spent his life leading a classroom with confidence. At home, his grown children started treating him like an afterthought. They ignored his advice and sometimes even laughed when he tried to correct them. At first, Frank argued back, trying to prove he still deserved their respect. But the more he fought, the worse things got. Then one day, he made a change. Instead of arguing, he started listening, really listening. He stopped chasing respect with words and carried himself like a man who already had it. He spoke calmly, with wisdom, without the need to win. Slowly, his children started noticing. They saw a man who wasn't desperate for their approval, who didn't need to prove himself, who simply carried himself with strength. If your children don't respect you, don't fight them for it. Show them what respect looks like by how you treat yourself. Keep your dignity. Speak with confidence. Never lower yourself to their level. When you hold your ground with grace, they will feel it, and over time, they'll follow your lead. Action 3. Withdraw your emotional dependence. One of the hardest lessons to learn as you grow older is that you can't depend on your children for emotional fulfillment. You may love them deeply, and you may want them to love and respect you in return, but the moment they sense that you need them to feel valued, the power in the relationship shifts. The truth is, people, even your own children, respect those who are emotionally independent. When you rely on them for validation, affection, or attention, it puts pressure on them. Instead of feeling grateful, they start feeling burdened. They may pull away, treat you with impatience, or even irritation. The more you chase their love, the less freely they give it. I once knew a woman named Helen, a kind-hearted mother who had given everything to her children. As they grew older and became busy with their own lives, she found herself waiting by the phone hoping they'd call. When they didn't, she called them instead, often too frequently. She reminded them how much she missed them, how she wished they would visit more. But instead of drawing them closer, it pushed them away. They saw her calls as an obligation instead of something they looked forward to. Then, one day, Helen did something different. She stopped waiting for their calls. She started focusing on herself, picking up new hobbies, going out with friends, and taking care of her own happiness. Something surprising happened. Her children started calling more. They started respecting her time and seeing her as someone with a full life of her own. The lesson is simple. The less you depend on your children to make you feel needed, the more they will value your presence. When you show them you can stand strong on your own, they'll start respecting you, not out of obligation, but because they genuinely admire the life you've built for yourself. Action 4. Set boundaries and enforce them. One of the biggest reasons children lose respect for their parents is because the parents let them. If you allow your children to talk down to you, dismiss your opinions, or treat your time and feelings as unimportant, they will keep doing it. Not because they're bad people, but because they're testing boundaries. And if you let them cross those boundaries, they will. Setting boundaries doesn't mean cutting off your children or creating conflict. It simply means calmly and firmly deciding what kind of behavior you will and won't accept, and then enforcing those boundaries when they're crossed. Take Robert, for example, a retired businessman who had spent his life running a company with discipline. But when it came to his adult children, he struggled. They interrupted him when he spoke, dismissed his concerns, and criticized the way he lived his life. At first, he tolerated it. He told himself it wasn't worth the fight. But over time, he realized that every time he stayed silent, he was teaching them that their behavior was acceptable. One day, Robert changed his approach. When his son interrupted him, he calmly said, "Continue speaking when you're ready to listen." When his daughter dismissed his opinion, he simply replied, "You don't have to agree with me, but I expect you to respect me." And when they continued to push his limits, he made it clear that if they couldn't treat him with respect, he wouldn't spend time with them. You know what happened? They started listening. At first they resisted, but over time, they realized that their father wasn't backing down. They saw that he valued himself enough to demand respect, and because of that, they started giving it to him. Action 5. Stop giving without appreciation. One of the quickest ways to lose respect is to keep giving to people who don't appreciate it. As parents, we do this more often than we realize. We give our time, our energy, and our support even when it's not acknowledged, when it's taken for granted, or when we're met with nothing but entitlement. Here's the truth. When you give to someone who doesn't appreciate it, you don't build love. You build expectation. They stop seeing your kindness as a gift and start seeing it as something they're entitled to. The moment you stop giving, they don't feel grateful. They feel inconvenienced. Take George, a father who had always been generous with his children. He helped them financially whenever they needed it, dropped everything to assist them, and rearranged his life to accommodate their needs. But instead of gratitude, he was met with complaints. When he finally needed their help, They were too busy. Then, one day, George made a change. He stopped overextending himself. He stopped offering help before it was even asked. And most importantly, he started saying no when he needed to. At first, his children were frustrated. They didn't understand why he wasn't bending over backward for them anymore. But over time, they started valuing his time. They started appreciating his efforts because they realized his generosity was a gift, not a guarantee. Action 6. Build a life outside of them. One of the most powerful ways to regain your children's respect is to show them that your happiness doesn't revolve around them. As parents, it's natural to devote ourselves to our children, to make them the center of our lives. But as we get older, that dynamic shifts. If you've spent your entire life prioritizing them, they might start seeing you as someone with nothing else going on. People respect those who have their own purpose, their own interests, and their own sense of fulfillment. If your children see that you rely on them for entertainment, validation, or meaning, they might start feeling suffocated, or worse, they might start seeing you as someone who has no life of their own. I knew a woman named Alana, a widow in her late 70s. After her husband passed, she poured everything into her children's lives, checking in constantly, giving advice they didn't ask for, and expecting them to fill the space her husband once did. But instead of drawing them closer, it pushed them away. They visited less, their calls became shorter, and Alana felt more alone than ever. Then, she made a choice. She joined a book club, started traveling with friends, and volunteered at a community center. She stopped making her children the center of her world, and something incredible happened. Her children started reaching out more. They were curious about what she was doing. They admired her independence. They respected her. Respect is not something you can demand. It's something you inspire through the way you carry yourself, set boundaries, and live your life. If your children have started treating you with less respect, don't waste your energy getting angry. Instead, shift your approach. Stop chasing their approval. Lead by example. Withdraw your emotional dependence. Set boundaries and enforce them. Stop giving without appreciation. And most importantly, build a life outside of them. If you do these things, something incredible will happen. Your children will start seeing you in a different light, not as someone waiting for their attention, but as someone who commands respect simply by being who you are. In time, that respect will come back to you, not because you demanded it, but because you earned it. Thank you for joining us today. We'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and share one thing you learned today and how you plan to use it in your life. Your thoughts are important to us, so don't hesitate to share them. Reading your comments gives us great motivation and encouragement. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us continue creating good content to inform and inspire you. Thanks for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.